honor to still be able to be connected with all of you. Thank you for your patience. Weather's a little crazy and technology isn't always our good friend, but that's okay. As far as the word identity, I know I might have been introduced already as the JV girls assistant coach, but my story today has more to do with my journey as a competitive figure skater. So when I think identity, I don't even really necessarily think of athlete first. I think of my time as a figure skater. I gave up a lot of opportunities and activities to pursue my skating because I didn't start until I was almost 11 years old. So being behind the 8 ball and having a lot of passion for it from the get-go, and of course the support from my parents, luckily, and a decent coaching staff, being a well-rounded athlete to begin with, and being a quick learner just allowed me to kind of dive into that world head first. Some minor injuries that I had early on didn't really take me out of my normal routine, kind of taught me a little bit about moving forward through adversity and things like that. And seamless comebacks just made it feel as though I would always have my little bubble of being on the ice and performing and competing. And at one point I thought I would go to the Olympics. When I turned 14, it was a little bit more realistic that I should shoot more for the national bound situation, just because the reality was just that. But I still had my path of figure skating is life, if you will. I later ended up tearing my right ACL for the first of what would be 2 times. And that's kind of when I first initially realized I didn't really know who I was without figure skating. It was a very typical situation of, oh, I can't do this because I have skating or competing or things like that. So I didn't really have what would some people would say a normal teenage life. I didn't really spend a lot of time with friends outside of my figure skating bubble. And when I did get invited to things, I wasn't able to because of my commitments. I did move my senior year of high school, and this kind of forced a little bit of a shift into some normalcy. I had quit a ton of sports and activities, including Girl Scouts, running cross country. I had quit tennis for a little while. But me moving my senior year allowed me to step back into some of those roles. So I managed the girls' soccer team and still was able to skate. And I also joined what actually was the boys' tennis team. We didn't have enough girls to make our own team. So myself and another female played on the boys' team. I think there were all of 8 of us. So very, very small school, but still had our opportunities to compete. And that had a little bit of a taste of what it's like to kind of be in a little bit more normal, but I couldn't help but feel a little guilty taking a step aside from my figure skating training, just because for a very long time, a very compact amount of time, that was my whole world. And again, that theme of identity, that's what I grasped onto the most. When I had initially injured myself, it was misdiagnosed to something where I just needed to take 6 weeks off. And this was a little bit detrimental to just my normalcy because if you guys recall, you have your opportunities for your senior night, senior day, your senior performances for all of your sports and activities. The performance I was preparing for was kind of like more of a recital rather than a competition. And that would be what I would consider my own personal Olympics. That show meant the world to me. It was the program that I started my Learn to Skate journey with, and it was going to be my last performance before leaving for college. So I almost didn't have that, and it kind of got me thinking, who am I without being able to skate? What do I do with myself? Where do I belong? Luckily, I was able to still perform in that show, so all was well. And then fast forward to my last tennis match before our state tournament, I ended up injuring myself there and then finding out that that original injury was my first ACL tear. So I had to wait about 4 months for an opportunity to get a surgery date. And in that time, my old school friends and my new high school friends kind of took me under their wing a little bit and kind of showed me what it's like to be a little more what they would consider normal. So all of them being athletes and having extracurriculars, I didn't really know what it was like to drive around on the weekends, go see fireworks, go to fairs, and all the while kind of crutching along and just feeling a sense of, oh, this is all the things that I have been missing. Trying to realize what I am without attaching myself to being a hard worker on the ice, trying to impress my coaches. My why kind of shifted from being passionate about my sport, but then also trying to attach myself to gaining approval from my peers at skating mostly. Didn't really let people at school bother me too much or judge me too much. They didn't really understand why I loved skating so much, and I didn't mind. And then as far as my parents' approval, because they were giving so much to allow me to pursue one of my biggest passions. So going and spending time with friends, it kind of opened up a kind of a scary place, but then it became more comfortable because that following year I had to leave for my first year of college. So it was almost a little bit of a blessing in disguise. I mentioned finding your why as a big piece of this conversation. I feel that a lot of our identity, especially in our most competitive years, you guys being in high school, those of you students in the audience, it's competitive no matter what you're engaging in. So let's say you're trying to be top of your class or first chair in an orchestra or making the lead of your musical or play. It doesn't always have to stem from athletics. I also did a lot of those activities, but happened to give them up because I loved skating more. So it's just a matter of tackling what your why is along with your passions and identity. And over time for me, I had to realize how to shift that. So I went back to school at the age of 27 to earn my bachelor's degree in exercise science and biomechanics. And this occurred after I tore my ACL for the second time. So still not really in a panic, but just realizing, all right, maybe I don't need to spend the rest of my life on the ice. What else is out there? And going through my surgery and injuries, I found that there might be a better way and less cookie cutter way to help people. I was always told, ooh, you're not quite right for skating. Your body type is a little bit different than the girls you're competing against. You're always going to have injuries and problems. And I didn't really trust that comment. And I later went to school to then discover a little bit more education than what I was given. So my why then turned into, how can I help people, not just athletes, just general population as well, gain their pathway to safely achieve goals that they may set for themselves. Anytime you set a new goal, it's slightly terrifying. I always encourage people to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and there's a lot that can be gained on the other side of what might make you nervous or fearful, and I was able to learn that firsthand. After I graduated, I actually moved halfway across the country, not knowing a soul. I lived in the suburbs of Chicago and had a handful of jobs, and when I moved, for whatever reason, I told myself, I'm going to hang up the skates. I'm never going to lace up again. Like, this is my newfound career. I'm going to be a different version of myself. And it wasn't in a way where it was given an ultimatum or just something that I set upon for myself, just changing and getting older and realizing I needed more stability in my life. I couldn't be a skating coach forever. About 3 months into that journey, I ended up putting on skates again. And through my own joy and remembering where I came from, so to speak, and what made me happy, I was able to start coaching again. And over the years prior to this, I know I was introduced as the JV girls hockey coach. I did start coaching hockey prior to all that, and that just ever evolved into a much bigger piece of myself. So if you asked me 10 years ago if 90% of what I was doing was in the hockey world, I probably would have not rolled my eyes, but just given you a little bit of an eyeball. I don't know about that. I love figure skating a little bit too much. As in fact, I'm always asked what I prefer better. If I had to coach a sport forever, I would pick hockey. If I had to pick a sport for myself forever, I would pick figure skating. So I'm very much so on the fence depending on what it is I'm trying to accomplish as far as for me or for helping others. I think the moving back and forth from Chicago to home and always finding my center at somehow being on the ice, that shifted my why a little bit. I think beyond the gym and my newfound career and what I went back to school for, I think I was able to find my passion in the students and athletes that I teach as well. The athlete that doesn't necessarily have the most talent, but they need the sport more than the sport needs them, for lack of a better term. It's not meant to sound harsh, but there are people who enjoy things that maybe they're not the most talented, but everybody deserves a place and they need to be coached appropriately for what they need. And I felt that over my journey. Sometimes I got a little pigeonholed. When I got injured, I felt that I was overlooked and wasn't properly supported. So every path is a little bit different and not cookie cutter. So trying to make ice sports better than where I left them has also evolved into my why. So wearing all of these hats, as far as if I'm a strength coach, corrective exercise specialist, coaching hockey, coaching figure skating, all of my whys are allowed to coexist. I don't need to be just one thing, and I'm not tied to any of my successes or lack thereof of one thing either. You're allowed to kind of ebb and flow and find your identity through those things. I think it's also important to realize that you don't want to end up on a slippery slope of pigeonholing yourself and making sure that you're surrounding yourselves with people that support you in ways. You all have excellent mentors at Westminster. You're all very lucky. And there's so many different opportunities for you to be encouraged to try things that you enjoy. And it's okay to realize that maybe that certain thing is not for you. I think I lost out on learning those lessons earlier in life and learned them later. And still I'm able to educate and help people on that category of things as well, just based on my own journey with my identity changing. Whether it was getting injured, moving schools, going to college, moving into Chicago, and then moving back home to Connecticut, all that was an adjustment period and never really the end of any era. It was just the ending of a chapter. And I know that gets used a lot and it's a very corny and cliche thing, but it is actual real life that I've lived, where I've been able to learn from my experiences and use those in everyday life. Things that I learned from skating are battling through adversity, time management, self-discipline. All of those things can be applied to everyday life. So as you all move forward with your experiences, I would think of change as a challenge if you're more of that type of person where you thrive in challenge. Change could be uncomfortable, but think of it as a hurdle to hop over to better yourselves and then find yourself in much better opportunities that maybe you never thought possible. When something gets described as your job, yes, that's true, that maybe that you being a student is your job. But I recently heard an interview from, I don't know if any of you tuned into the Olympics, Ilya Malinin, the quad god, had a pretty upsetting performance, wasn't at the top of his game when so much pressure was on him to win the Olympics. He answered in an interview something about getting right back to work because it's his job to do so. That was almost troublesome for me and kind of brought me back to when I felt similarly. If my coaches weren't happy or if I didn't place well at a competition, I thought my parents would be unhappy and wouldn't let me skate as much. And I kind of turned it more into a job and forgot about my joy and passion for it. I would be mindful of those things that happen across your life as well. And just always try to reset and reframe and bring it back to your why. So I think that wraps up my point of view on that. So my identity being a figure skater and an athlete has now morphed into me being a coach, and hopefully everyone took something away from that today.